Europe, peace as usual in Europe.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Alison for sharing that extensive insight on this news. Thank you very much, Alison, for staying with us throughout this topic today. Now we stay in region and we move on to UK. London's Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley has stated today that the force must undergo cultural change following a damning report that found systematic racism in its treatment of black Londoners and staffs. The review, 30 Patterns of Harm, authored by human resources expert Shireen Daniels, has stated that the Met's systems and leadership perpetuate racial harm while shielding the institution from reform. Daniels cited evidence of bias based on skin tone and accent, describing anti-blackness as the clearest sign of dysfunction. Rowley, who took office in 2022, said the report emphasized the need for relentless cultural reform, adding that the Met is conducting the largest corruption purge in British policing history. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international relations expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, looking at this news, what structural reforms are necessary for the UK to address systematic racism within the Metropolitan Police and beyond cultural change initiatives?
Well, this is not the first report of this nature. There have been several over the past decade or so, all of which have agreed that there are serious bias problems within the Met, especially focused towards the both black members of the Met, but also the black community that it's meant to serve. Those reports have uniformly prescribed, from the outside looking in, changes that need to take place. And because of the structural and cultural impediments to implementing those changes within the Met, the Met leadership didn't feel that they owned, as it were, these reforms. They went nowhere, which is why the external reports keep saying there's a bias problem within the Met. This particular report finally seems to have learned that lesson and has turned it over to the Metropolitan Police's leadership to themselves introspect and look inward and say, what is wrong with us with respect to this bias problem? Again, it's both bias towards serving officers, especially at the leadership level, but also the communities that the Met serves. So there's an opportunity here for some serious introspection on the part of the Metropolitan Police leadership that might lead to the cultural and structural changes that will at least mitigate and minimize bias. I don't think bias is going to go away. It's sort of part of British culture, Western culture, human nature. But if it can be mitigated so that it doesn't affect policing and enhances the ability of the Met to bring peace, order, and good governance to a very vibrant, robust, and diverse city, that will be a good thing. This isn't for the first step, but maybe it's the first serious step towards that goal.
Right, and building on your answer, you also mentioned this is not the first time that such case has come to light. How do you think, how can public trust in policing in UK be restored when reports these kind of reports are coming again and again? And also, should external oversight bodies be allowed so that they can ensure accountability and reform within this policing?
I think there are already some structures in place. The police don't do simply what they want. They are, in a democracy like the UK, they are accountable to the government and to the people. I think though that efforts in the past that have been initiated from the outside and intended to impose change simply haven't worked, because cultures and structures in organizations like the Metropolitan Police resist that. It's visceral, it's instinctive, it's just the way it's reflexive. I think putting the ball in the court of the leadership of the Metropolitan Police is a good move, because if they can look inward and say, okay, we have a disproportionate lack of black leadership, black officers serving in leadership positions, maybe we need to fix that. And if that gets fixed, then there's a built-in dynamic. Those black officers, and I'm not stereotyping at all here, I'm just saying they're going to be more sensitive to this issue, and And that then will trickle down to the middle ranks and to the constables on patrol in the streets. And that could be the beginning of a shift. And once the shift internally takes place, that there are more black officers in leadership positions, that the issues that are confronting the black members of the force are get to be addressed, then we will see that ripple outwards towards the communities that they serve. More sensitivity to the cultural diversity of London, less bias towards certain people of a certain skin tone. But I think ownership on the part of the Met is the first important step in that direction, and that's what this report is recommending.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, we stay in the region. The European Union has suspended Georgia's participation in EU-funded regional projects on security and organized crime after EU Ambassador to Georgia, Paul Helsinki, addressed a letter to Georgia's Foreign Ministry. The letter, addressed to First Deputy Foreign Minister George Zurabashvili, stated that exceptional circumstances in Georgia have resulted in the de facto suspension of Georgia's EU accession process, and informed that Georgia's participation in subsequent EU regional projects on security and organized crime has been suspended. Earlier, the EU Enlargement Commissioner stated that Georgia has backslid in its pursuit of EU membership as well. Now we welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international relations expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at Georgia, how does this suspension of Georgia's participation reflect broader concerns about democracy in Georgia, and what more does it reflect about current status of Georgia?
Well, of course, Georgia was granted candidate status back in 2022, I believe, and then the EU paused that in 2023 because of lack of progress. 9 points that the Georgians were meant to be addressing in terms of internal reforms. The usual and predictable elements were there. Promotion of democracy, freedom of press, but there's also a lot of security and policing reforms that were meant to be implemented, and they weren't. And the European Union decided that Georgia was backsliding, that it wasn't not only not ready for membership with the European Union, but wasn't even moving in the right direction. And so this is kind of the culmination of that. There were a lot of programs that were put in place, including on the policing, internal security side, that were meant to help the Georgians prepare to meet the standard to join the European Union. And now those have been suspended or terminated, which signals that the EU is basically writing off Georgia as a candidate and as a future member. And that, of course, has geopolitical knock-on effects, because Georgia is in a very important, it's a hinge in a sense, a very important place on the map between the West and Russia, in a region in which China is increasingly influential. Losing Georgia in that geopolitical tussle is not a positive development from the European Union's perspective, from NATO's perspective, and nevertheless, that's where we are.
Yes, indeed. And what political and economic consequences might Georgia face from this de facto suspension of EU accession process?
Well, in the short term, the immediate term, what this was all about was terminating aid programs related to security and policing. So there's that, but that's the tip of a very big iceberg. I think it will have further effects down the road in terms of Georgia's access to markets, freedom of movement, investment, security and defense cooperation, diplomatic alignment. All of those things are going to be affected if the decision has been made definitively, which it appears it has, that Georgia is not fit for the European Union and is not even moving in the right direction. Then a lot of barriers are going to go up. And from a rational perspective in Tbilisi, in Georgia, they're going to look at this and say, well, if the Europeans aren't going to be our friends in this neighborhood, we need friends. Who are those friends going to be? And many Georgians, not all, because there's a certain anti-Russian bias, but it makes sense to cozy up to Russia, and it makes sense to embrace China increasingly. So I think those are the medium to longer term implications of this. I'm not sure that the European Union had much of a choice. Georgians weren't moving in the direction that would put them in the same democratic league as France or even Hungary. So the Brussels had no choice really, but it's still going to have consequences both for the Georgians and the Europeans, and for NATO and for Europe more broadly.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Andrew Latham for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on. The European Union has decided to tighten restrictions on multiple entry visas for Russians and plans to unveil the updated rules later today, according to a report by YLE, citing a statement from Finnish Foreign Ministry. The decision was made on November 6th by the European Commission, and the ministry has indicated that the announcement will come on Friday. Finnish diplomats provided input on the issue, and while specifics of the decision have not been disclosed, the new rules will include several waivers. According to reports, the EU has already stopped issuing multiple entry Schengen tourist visas to most Russians, and now is working on further restricting Russian citizens' ability to visit EU countries. The new measures are expected to come into effect this week. Now we move on to our next news. 6 migrants have died and 4 people were injured after their car crashed during a police pursuit near the Black Sea city of Burgas, Bulgaria. Border Police Chief Commissioner Anton Zlantanov has informed that the Romanian-registered Skoda carrying 10 people failed to stop for a check and sought to evade capture on Thursday night. In the crash, 6 people died at the scene, while the Romanian driver and 3 surviving migrants received first aid. The survivors were reported to be from Afghanistan. Since 2015, Balkan countries have become major transit routes for refugees and migrants from the Middle East, Afghanistan, Asia, and Africa, fleeing wars and poverty to the European Union. Many of them resort to smuggling networks for help.